brand, there are so many channels on the online side itself that I've seen them use. The obvious ones being either your own website or app. Then there are the third-party marketplaces like an Amazon or a Flipkart or a Nykaa or a FirstCry and all. Even there, people adopt two different models: either sell on their own in the marketplace model or sell to a B2B partner like a Cloudtail who sell on their behalf. And then there are some smaller channels like social commerce and content first commerce kind of platforms. Do you have a view on, which are the in early days especially, which are the channels that make more sense for some of these upcoming brands?
Yeah. So Rahul, firstly, it's quite embarrassing that I'm answering questions on consumer brands with your experience. You introduced us so graciously, but just for the benefit of everyone on this channel, Rahul is my go-to guy for anything when it comes to investing or tech. He's obviously a partner at Stellaris, a co-founder there, and before that, had a very long career with Helio on various boards across lots of consumer brands that we've all loved, including Simply Learn, Shop Clues, YLG, etc. So, I think your experience far outweighs mine. So I can just give a point of view here. But my sense is each channel has a role, Rahul, and I divide channels into three broad buckets. One is your own D2C web store. The second one is vertical marketplaces, so Nykaa, FirstCry, Big Basket in grocery, etc. And then you have your horizontal e-commerce, right? And in each of these channels, I think there is a certain, especially in the early stage, and that's the question.
Mm-hmm.
I think the D2C web store is essentially your online consumer lab. Here you can, in a very controlled environment, test out a lot of things, pricing, different packaging options, even product formulations. You can test out various formulation ABC and look at cohorts to figure out which one the customer is liking, look at their NPS data, etc. on each of the various formulations that you've had. So essentially on your D2C website, you can create almost like your core mix of what product, in which packaging and what price is really loved by the customer. Once you get some kind of confidence, then the vertical marketplaces actually help you access your early adopters and help you understand, what happens when this goes to a slightly larger scale. And that then snowballs into the horizontal marketplaces, where you can really get to the next level of scale. So at each level, it's almost like an SKU or a new product that you want to launch within your portfolio of products within your brand. You are passing it through like a graduation metric. So on your D2C website, you need to have metrics like repeats, NPS, overall, the customer feedback, etc. On the vertical marketplaces, it could be more around saying, hey, do I have a business model now? Now that some PMF has been verified on my D2C website, can I sell this and make money off it? Is it contribution positive, etc.? And then really go all guns blazing on the horizontals. The point is, if you launch a new half-baked product on the horizontal and it goes horribly wrong, so that product will get very bad reviews. Now, as a brand, you might want to delist it, but then it does have a rub-off effect on the other products in the brand, so you don't want to take that risk. So at least that's my point of view, but we got a practitioner with us, so
Yeah, Shrey, would love to hear your views also on this one.
Sure. So I would actually completely echo what Vinay is saying. I think for us at Kapiva, our journey was slightly different, but I think broadly in terms of the buckets that he identified, totally agree. And in terms of the roles also, I would say pretty aligned. I think the one incremental thing I would add to your question, Rahul, is around whether to go direct on some of these marketplaces versus sell B2B, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think in our experience, we found that it almost always makes sense definitely at the early stages and even as you scale to go direct. So the sort of FBX model, whether it's fulfilled by Amazon or something else, typically works better than a model where you're selling to some of the larger aggregators, because as a small startup in CPG, you just end up getting a little bit lost. So I think that's been one definite learning for us. And I think in our experience, again, I think the interesting thing around these different channels, whether it's D2C, vertical marketplaces, marketplaces or horizontals is just some of the tools that you need, sometimes even the teams that you need end up being quite different. So again, that's something to be watchful for, which is why it probably makes sense to sequence out your efforts as you build out these channels for the business.
Interesting. No, I have the other side of the argument, as I've seen a lot of younger brands, the CAC on their own website invariably ends up being higher than cost of sale on Amazon or vertical marketplaces.
Yeah.
So as a younger startup, how feasible is it to start in this sequence of own website leading to horizontal marketplace?
Sure. Sorry, Vinay, go for it, please.
No, Shrey, it's yours.
So I would say the demarcations, right? And we've also kind of wrestled with some of these dynamics over time. I think the demarcations are a little bit hazy, where in the very, very early stages, when you just have a product, almost certainly it makes sense to probably start with the website, because of the reasons that when you're still trying to figure out product, when you're still trying to figure out sort of PMF, at that stage, it probably makes sense to go small, do a bunch of experiments in a very, very sort of narrow way, and then go from there into the vertical marketplaces. But I think you do need to keep these things running, because to your point, Rahul, completely agree. I think it's barring some exceptions, it's very hard to scale purely D2C led in the early days, because just the economics, you end up sacrificing a lot of that sort of profit to Facebook, Google as rent. So it's just hard to make money there. So I think you need to balance them, and maybe there's not always a very, very clean sort of handoff, but I would still agree with that broad sort of sequencing and of how to think about it.
Interesting. Vinay, do you have any different views on that, or Anag, if you have?
It's a practical kind of take, right, Rahul? If you have raised some kind of seed money or some kind of angel money, and you can be a little more thoughtful about how you want to approach the market and really protect the equity of the brand that you're trying to build, then probably that sequencing would work. And even if it means a little bit of burn upfront on your D2C website, you can afford that because you have some equity capital that you've raised. But if you haven't and you're really bootstrapping it, then probably what Shrey is saying, hustle and create some cash flow on a marketplace, and then reinvest that cash flow back into your D2C. So it could be both. But increasingly what's happening is that with this, especially after last year, there's been a step jump in digital adoption. So increasingly, I don't know, Rahul, if you're seeing that, but at least we are seeing in the early stage startup area, the D2C sales are looking much healthier than they were 3 years ago as a mix.
That is true. And also AOVs, I've also seen on D2C, maybe that's how founders manage it, but even otherwise I've seen being better than on the marketplaces. Typically the marketplaces end up being one or two product basket. And Shrey, you can add, like you will have real experience on that one.
No, I think, yeah, for us as well, D2C typically ends up being, the AOV ends up being almost for the 1.5, 1.6x of what it is on the marketplaces. And again, it's basically because it allows you that flexibility to talk to the consumer about a lifestyle or a regime or something or a habit, as opposed to just being in that marketplace where you're really talking to them about individual products.
Got it. One question I had for you, Shrey, we talked about directly selling on these marketplaces versus the B2B part. Sometimes when I find, especially categories where the ASPs are not very high. So let's say something in food, especially, normal daily routine food, where AOVs are not very high. There, would you still subscribe to the view that one should go direct on marketplace versus Cloudtail? Because at least what I've heard is that on Cloudtail and all, you can at least, they take care of all the shipping cost and everything. So will you distinguish that suggestion between two, depending on the category?
No, it's a really interesting question. So I think for very, very low ASP products, you're right. Cloudtail sometimes is the only way to really make the economics work. That said, though, I think one question that we've sometimes reflected on, right, is if you're really beginning to go to market as a new brand, or say, for example, anytime we enter a new category with a new product, our internal thesis has moved to a direction that when we start with a new product, we'll probably go higher in price, because if you do see yourself as, say, online first, digitally first, it just makes sense to start with a higher ASP product, because I think if you're going very low ASP, then I would almost ask the question of, is digital or online really, does it make sense to have that as your first and primary sort of go-to-market channel? Because you can use Cloudtail as a hack to make economics work, though FBA sometimes I've seen brands, we've done it as well. You can do bundling as a way of making the economics work a little bit better. But I think if you're at that end of the price spectrum, then I suspect that it'll almost always be quite hard to make numbers work on most digital channels. So then maybe you need to fundamentally question, okay, maybe we are a offline
offline first company.
Yeah.
Interesting. And Shrey, if you can, for the audience, walk through the early journey of Kapiva. When maybe Ayurveda itself was not I would say not a buzzword as it became during COVID time.
Yeah.
How did you go about scaling up in first year or two?
Sure. So we actually had a pretty sort of, I'd say, interesting and circuitous journey. So we set up the business, Amev and I, in 2016. The first 2 years we actually, and I think that's, Vinay, if you recall, maybe back in 2016 is the first time we spoke. We were running a very different business. Our sort of problem statement at the time was, let's set up a Ayurveda brick and mortar clinic chain. The problem we were trying to solve was this problem of non-standardized Ayurveda based primary care, medicine care. And we did that for 2 years, had 4 clinics, realized at the end of 2 years that model was not very scalable, sort of margins, sort of returns on capital were a little bit challenged there. And I think as we were figuring these things out, realized that there was a big gap in this Ayurveda meets food FMCG space. So I think first 2 years were doing something completely different. Really what it was a good way to learn about our consumer, which was pretty common, the Ayurveda believer. Then I think 2018 is when phase 2 of the business started. And again, I think in phase 2, there are 2 parts to it. I think 2018 and early 2019, we probably, I think when Vinay and I again re-engaged in 2018, when Fireside first invested in us, end 2018, early 2019, we probably saw ourselves more as a sort of offline first brand, where our offline was our primary go-to-market through most of that first year of FMCG. And it was only, say, maybe in year 2 of the journey where we really realized and kind of got fully aligned, woke up to the potential of what was happening online, and in some ways repurposed ourselves as a very online first brand. And I think that's very much how we see ourselves today.
And when you became online first, which channels you really focused on initially? Was it more own website, I don't know if you had an app or something, but was that the big focus, or was more marketplaces or oriented channels?
Sure. So we actually focused on marketplaces first. Back through all of, like, say, 2018, 19, 20, and marketplaces really was what we were spending time on. In hindsight, if we were to, I think we definitely missed a trick where we could have focused on our own website and made it strategic to our business much earlier. So I think that was probably a miss looking back. The reason we really focused on marketplaces was, I think we just had a view internally, Amev and I both, that look, the economics on this sort of D2C business, how will they make sense? We were a little bit unsure. Plus, I think both of us, with our sort of prior experiences, we still were coming from this slightly more offline-centric view of the world. So I think from there, marketplaces seemed more adjacent. And I think it's only maybe in 2019, maybe a year ago now, year and a half ago, where we really started rolling out our own website and focusing on that as a sales channel, but also much more. And Vinay actually has been sort of helping us, handholding us through each stage of the journey. So Amev actually works on the website very closely with Vinay, sort of constantly picking his brain on sort of what to do, how to do it, etc.
Interesting.
Yeah, sometimes that puts me at loggerheads with you in the car.
True. I have a question for you, Vinay.
Sorry, on that point itself, I think you've been in D2C already with.
Anag, you'll have to repeat that. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I didn't get that. Sorry.
Yeah. Please ask. Okay.
I think you're in a bad network.
Yeah. So Shrey,
Yes.
Sorry,
Yeah.
is it better now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry for that. Yeah, so for reviews, is there any way for your own website to have reviews and like also make it credible? Or like, do you think like there's always going to be low credibility on the website reviews, so or customer testimonials? So like people are only going to trust, like, say Nike or Amazon. Like, have you experimented, let's say, with testimonials reviews on your website?
Sure. So you done it. So two thoughts there. One is there are ways to sync, and I don't know the specifics on it, but there are ways to sync your website to say stuff that's being said about you on say some of these marketplaces, particularly Amazon. So that's one definite tool you can use. Secondly, what you can use is you can use sort of again influencer-led credibility on your website. So at that point of purchase, you can invoke endorsement from influencers. You can invoke endorsement from say consumers on say other third-party platforms as well. So there are ways to hack around that. I think the way to, in some ways, a very effective way to really gain credibility is through the content and the storytelling that you're doing. I think consumers can tell a authentic, informative story on your product page from something which seems slightly weaker, right? So I think the content that you actually have on the pages is every bit as important as a vetted review. So I think that's a very important lever to drive trust at that final stage.
Interesting. I have a question. Actually, I have a couple of questions. For Vinay. Vinay, if, let's say a start, and typically, a lot of these consumer brand startups nowadays, they start hitting 40, 50 lakh per month kind of revenue. When they come to you for investment, do you care at that time as to what percentage of their business is coming from own website versus other channels?
Yeah. First of all, Rahul, actually that 40, 50 lakhs has itself become larger. Right?
That's true.
So,
That's true.
in fact, we have to work harder now to, start engaging with entrepreneurs earlier. And we'd love to, engage with them as early as possible because, the growth trajectory, what used to take people 6 months is happening in 3 months. What used to happen in 3 months is happening next month. Right. So it's pretty quick the way things are moving in this area. But it's not that important, Rahul. It depends. See, for example, we are investors in a company called Gynoveda.
Sure.
And the DNA of the founders there is very D2C because they've run D2C businesses in ClearTrip and Acco, etc. So they understand that space very well, and therefore it is no surprise that that channel takes precedence in that business. Whereas 3 years ago, for example, when we first met Aman from Boat, he didn't have a D2C business, but he was scaling quite well on Amazon. And that's because he comes from that JBL sales experience who understood the whole e-commerce sales process. So I think it's very, very dependent on what the core team has comfort with and what kind of skill sets they have, etc. But we'd like to see some D2C business. There's no number there that I can speak of. The reason is intent. Saying that it might be tougher business to scale. It has it's a goal by 1,000 passes. You got to set up your web store. You got to make sure that all your APIs for delivery, for payments, for or marketing automation or CRM, etc., are all kind of piped in. All your events are being tracked. Remarketing is happening, and then you have to do your campaigns, etc. So there is that little bit of commitment upfront. So that intent is interesting for us. And that little bit of data that you have on D2C sales actually tells a lot. Because on an Amazon sales, it's very difficult to read between the noise on saying, what's the repeat, what's the cohort, what's the NPS. NPS, of course, the reviews can give you a good idea, but maybe some consumer verbatims on, what is the consumer saying. Also, when you have a D2C business, it's very easy to reach out to some of these consumers, obviously with the permission, and request them for qualitative feedback as well. And those, I think, become at the very early stage a very important parameter for us to try and understand, what is the gap that this brand is trying to plug in the market. Where are the customers coming from? What is the source of growth? Why were they unhappy with what they were using before? What are they happy about? With what more do they want? How willing are they to refer it? So all of those early signs kind of become good lead indicators for us to start evaluating. If the gap truly is hitting a consumer pain point that's absolutely vital. That needs to be solved today. So the timing question in every investment starts getting answered there. So I think those kind of questions are important. From an investment point of view, and they get easily answered through D2C sales, right? That's why some level of D2C sales is always comforting.
Got it. And one controversial question there, and we were having this debate internally a week back. Is it like in offline world, one can build a brand without having your own store, right? Through third party, general trade, modern trade and all. In the online world, can one build a brand in long term without a significant D2C presence?
I mean, there's a living example in both.
Okay.
They don't have a significant D2C presence even today. I would venture a guess that Wow shampoos as well, their majority business would come from e-commerce platforms. So there are multiple such examples, Rahul. So can it be built? Yes, it can be built. But wouldn't you want to have a direct connect with your consumers if given the opportunity? Speaking from the other life of building distribution-led or brands 1.1, we used to call them back in Unilever. And we've given arm and a leg to talk to our customers. Not even a customer, a consumer. Customers we used to call our retail trade. So we give an arm and a leg to talk to them. So if there's an opportunity and infrastructure that enables you to do it at scale, as a brand builder, take it.
Got it. Let me, there are 3-4 hands up here. Let me just ask one or two of those folks to interject and ask questions. I'll just start from the top. Varun, if you can. Varun, are you there? Yeah.
Hi guys, how are you today? It was a pleasure hearing from all of you. Much appreciate that. So just rather a question itself. Oh, sorry, just to introduce myself before. I run a small fashion startup which is absolutely focused on that and basically getting pashminas across the world as easy as possible. So 90% of our sales is US, and that's what we are focusing at. That's one of the core ventures we are at. And completely an e-commerce B2C play, absolutely. So what I would love to know is in the today's time when the valuations are more on top line, with not much, of course there is a focus, but then substantially less focus on the margins and bottom, at least in the initial stage and the growth stage. How does that work out for a venture like me, which is self-funded? Hence, the focus has been more on the bottom line than the top line, and margins. So, what would your suggestions and thoughts be in that space?
So maybe I can try to answer one part of that, and others can also please jump in. At least I would say the good part about the D2C or the online consumer brand space is that out here margins are still a focus. So at least when I look at companies, I do look at their gross margins, their marketing cost, the repeats part if they have a D2C presence. So it is still run in that manner. Now, obviously, they may not be profitable companies necessarily, but at least as an investor, we don't like backing online brands which are losing money on a direct cost or after marketing and all. And Vinay, please chip in if you have a different view on that one.
No, absolutely. I think contribution, EBITDA is obviously not expected at the early stage because you want to be building your team ahead of time, getting ready for scale, etc. But at a contribution level, obviously, we look at it critically. And yeah, sure. I mean, if there's some negative contribution and there's a reason, maybe you invested in a big brand campaign that quarter, and that's why you've got a negative contribution. I think those are valid investments. But if on a ongoing as a going concern basis, your contribution margin isn't there, then it becomes difficult, especially in categories like the one you're in, Varun, where the frequency of purchase is very low. So if somebody's buying a Pashmina product today, my sense is they won't need another one for at least the next 6 months to a year, and therefore that becomes a new customer acquisition the next time they come on board. So the LTV game really doesn't play out, and therefore making sure that the economics are there, the fundamental economics are strong upfront, actually enables scale in the longer term.
Let me ask Shyam if you can. I've just added to the speaker. I don't know if he is still there, and I still see him.
So my question is to Shrey. So a little background. So I am setting up a D2C brand called Clean Label. And Shrey, I wanted to understand there are so many other Ayurvedic brands like, let's say, Patanjali's and Kama Ayurveda, they position very differently. So what has been your growth drivers and why do customers attracted to your brand? And typically scale, so what has been your growth hacking strategies?
Sure. So I think fundamentally when we looked at the market 3 years ago, right, I think the big gap that we observed was there were a lot of people talking Ayurveda, but we didn't see a lot of people talking about Ayurveda and food / nutrition to our generation, so to speak. So to people who were 25 to 40, who were really looking to make those smaller incremental lifestyle changes, which could help them lead a better life in the long run. I think we saw that a lot of the incumbent brands were talking from almost a pedestal, and that pedestal could either come from legacy. So the brand is 100 years old, or it could come from, having a sort of very charismatic person at the helm. But we see anyone who was able to talk about Ayurveda, food, nutrition in a compelling way, where they were able to tell people, okay, you know what, if you make this small change, if you have a little sip of amla juice in the morning, these are the benefits that will accrue to you, and this is how they will help you in your life today as you're off an hour-long commute to work, coming back, etc. So that was the real gap that we observed. So it was about sort of building a brand which was relatable. It was about building a brand that backed its claims by evidence, and of course on the product side stayed very, very authentic to your promises. Because I think one of the big issues and opportunities that we observed in Ayurveda was that there were a lot of claims, not always sort of backed up by what was happening with the product or what the product delivered. Some of those claims were sometimes fantastical almost. So that's been our fundamental positioning for the brand over the last 2-3 years, and obviously evolved over time, but broadly stayed to this. And today, really, the way we think about the brand, the business, it's about saying, hey, how can we add Ayurveda to your day-to-day food so you have just 1, 2, 3 better meals in a day? Because we truly do believe that if you can infuse to sort of every single moment of consumption of food, that meal will be a better meal, a healthier meal. And I think that's a boost that a lot of us need as we're sort of going. I think that's been what the brand has stood for. In terms of growth hacking, to be honest, I'm not sure we've really had a silver bullet growth hack. I think a lot of it has just been about just kind of incrementally trying to execute better. So I think we started off with a very, very product-led company where my co-founder has a deep background in Ayurveda, really, really focused on product quality. And the early days, to be honest, that was probably our biggest growth hack. As we built out, I think we built a strong sales culture in some ways, focus on sales. That became a hack over time. Again, sort of marketing, both at the performance and brand level, we've been becoming more sophisticated on that. So I think this sequence of doing certain things better, but not really sure we've had a one.
I have a question for Shrey as well, and maybe Rahul and Vinay, you can also jump in. A lot of people talk building communities around their brand. And building community is also a costly investment because you have to invest upfront and the results come over a period of time. What do you think is the right stage for start investing in building communities?
So I think that's a really, really interesting question. And in some ways, this whole community question is tied up to what Vinay was articulating earlier about, why would you do D2C? It's about having a direct voice or line of communication with your consumer in some way, right? And so I would say there's no ideal time. I'd say the ideal time is as early as possible, but I think it depends a lot, right? I think it depends on the category that you're in. So the example that when I took Gynoveda, right, to me at least it feels like a category which is very well suited for D2C, which is very well suited for community building because it's addressing a very, very specific need. And in that category, you need that information, education, etc. So I think folks can start probably very, very early. I think there's other brands again, some of these kids sort of breakfast brands, they also started building communities organically very early stages. I think in some cases, obviously, when I talked about boat, they've really been able to build in some ways a community at scale with boat heads, right? Where it's just a much more scale sort of community. But no perfect answer. But I think community in some way for me really means the ability to talk one-on-one in a slightly more democratic way versus just having a TV commercial running for millions of people with the consumer. Community in some ways can take many different shapes or forms. But I would suggest, Vinay, I would love to get your view on this as well, because Vinay is really the expert on this.
No expert, Shrey, learning from you guys. Maybe using Kapiva as a guinea pig for my experiments. Thank you so much for that. But Shrey, I have a very different viewpoint, right? I think customers don't. They consume a product as one part of who they are. They're not going to join a community just because they like the product. Will be driven by obviously conversations and content, and it will flow from what the purpose of the brand is. And the purpose can't be I want to sell you another, skin cream, another juice, another bar, another headphones. So, for example, Shrey picked up boat heads. I mean, that community is so viral because it is not about the speakers or the headphones or the earphones. It is about what you do with it, the music that you love, and the passion of that, the music that you consume. And boat always has associated itself with it. So, for example, the boat heads feel like insiders, because they get early access to any new Bollywood releases, as they get access to music festivals. They get a lot of information about what is happening with their favorite musicians. They get a platform to interact with some of the upcoming musicians or their favorite musicians. So both enables all of that to actually emerge to live their passion of which is music. Similarly, Mama's community, for example, just solves parental stress. I mean, in nuclear families, you don't have access to your in-laws or your parents to help you raise a kid. First-time parents, what do? They turn to the internet. And here's the community that helps them just solve parental stress without trying to sell a product. Product might happen in some certain conversations. Gynoveda has a community called Circle of Sisterhood, which is just a safe space for women to discuss their issues. Nothing to do with the product at all. So I think communities will have to be built, and brands should think about building communities, because, like Shrey said, that the day of one-to-many communication as far as brand building is over. Rest in peace. I think it is a many-to-many communication. Brands have to be receptive to communication back from the consumers and saying, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? How can I create a better space for people? And some of these people will end up using my brand. Not all of them will. So once brands can answer that, I think then the community piece can start coming together. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit of a force fit. It becomes difficult to scale.
I had a follow up on that, Vinay,
Interesting.
and thanks a lot for that perspective. In terms of channels where communities could be built, like have you seen your companies, portfolio companies, using Instagram as an effective initial channel to do that? Because I keep seeing on Instagram that a lot of pages are essentially turning into communities.
Yeah, I mean, go where the fish are, right? If your community prefers Instagram, then create an Instagram page and put out content and encourage conversations that are important to your community there. If they prefer Facebook, then that's where it go. That's where you do it. For some of the younger brands, especially early stage, I'm now seeing platforms like Josh, platforms like ShareChat, etc., becoming interesting for them. So doesn't matter. These are all just mediums, right? Depends upon what your community wants. For example, there is a brand called Design Cafe in our portfolio, which is very, very active on Quora, because a home interior project is a fairly involved decision for a user, and they want to ask and answer a lot of questions. And Quora seems to be the right place for them to be interacting.
Interesting. Maybe I'll ask Akash in the room to Akash, you can ask your question.
Sure. Thanks, Rahul. Just as a quick intro, I work for a consumer-focused fund called as El Capital, and I think this is quite even a heat internally in terms of the way the D2C space will evolve. I think the question I had were two questions. One, are there certain categories where they are naturally more fit to D2C, and the role, I would say, the frequency of buying, and I think you guys were discussing earlier the average order. And second, when this space evolves, do you guys see a similar kind of a trend catching up even on the D2C brand side, what we see on the offline side, where there are apparel brands, there are, I would say, fashion brands, there are cosmetic brands, but they have kind of hit a certain level of, I would say, scale limit. And that is also more driven by the kind of individualism as a trend that is picking up. So love to hear your thoughts.
See, at least in the second one, I would say it's a question of the aspiration of the founders. Large FMCG companies globally don't rely on single brand being the only way to become large, right? They have, and there are these terms called house of brands and all, which essentially means that if you want to be a $1 billion revenue company, there is a certain outcome possible from a single brand. And at some point of time, you'll say, I want a second and a third brand in the portfolio. And also it's a question of market that you're in. But I think, at least if you think from venture, and you guys most likely come slightly later also.
Yes.
I would say having multiple brands become important to get to a large size. The good part about brands is that once you have consumer understanding, then obviously extensions are possible, and maybe sometimes also newer categories are also possible, or newer adjacent categories also possible. Vinay, would you have a different view?
Rahul, my sense is in our venture space versus Akash, like obviously you guys come in much later.
Yes.
But in our venture space, at least we are not even evaluating whether the founder has a vision for house of brands, right? What we are looking at is saying the brand you're trying to build, A, is it in a space that is scalable? B, the core team, does it have the abilities to scale it? C, is the timing right that this category can get disrupted, right? And then give it a shot. And if you're trying to do house of brands very early or trying to do too much diversification very early, I think it kind of spreads yourself too thin, right? So getting to $20-30 million of revenue with one brand is possible. Once you get there, then you can figure out, because then you have the cash flow, you have the profitability. By then, you also
have the traffic coming in. Yeah.
Yes, and you also have the ability to attract more investment on your balance sheet. So then you can figure out what is the path forward. But till then, I think at least it should be blinders on, just get this executed, get to that scale, and then figure out life.
And I think that's where some of the examples that you guys also touched upon, like Mama Earth and even MyGlam, all of these guys have had at least a champion brand internally, which have led to the success that they have reached so far.
Yeah,
Yes.
you need some scale in a brand before you can say, okay, fine, this will continue to grow at a certain pace. And now if I want to really exponentially keep growing my corporate, then my corporate strategy determines a house of brand strategy rather than, I want to build a house of brand strategy because there's a space for it.
Got it.
And if I can add, Akash, is that, see, house of brand is also only one way to scale, because there the assumption is you're only online, right?
Yeah.
There are other dimensions to scale as well. As in, at some point of time, you may want to build an offline distribution as well.
Yes.
If the brand is well suited, global expansion is also a possibility. So with one single brand, at least those 2-3 dimensions exist, and then hopefully, you can also have a second brand and a third brand at scale.
I mean, point in case could be Wakefit, where they are now trying to experiment going offline.
True.
Yeah, and they also started with mattresses, got to a certain scale on mattresses, and then started getting into the sleep space, which was pillows and blankets and duvets, etc. And now have started getting into furniture as well. So they've taken step-by-step approach to proliferating the SKUs in their portfolio as one vector of growth. And then Rahul and you guys mentioned there is offline, then there's international expansion. So you can figure out various things, and then if it's more capital efficient to create another brand, then why not? But
Got it.
Got to get to a certain scale first.
Got it. And on the first one, do you guys have this thought process in mind that, how do you invest in a category which is more frequently bought online, at the same time the AOV is not low enough where the CAC doesn't make sense?
Sorry, Akash, you said that the AOV is low.
How do you guys balance the two decision-making choices where the frequency of buying shouldn't be as low, where the customer comes every second year or third year? At the same time, from an average order value standpoint, it shouldn't be as low as where a CAC of even 600, 700 stops making sense. And have you guys seen any categories where some of these things are naturally ticks the box?
See, personal care is a classic example where it ticks all the boxes, and which is why you see a lot of brands in that area. Health, which is where Shrey operates, health and wellness.
Yes.
Both these are high gross margin categories, and hence, even at a 600, 700 AOV, you can still make enough money selling on your own website and on third-party platforms. Now, there are lower margin categories where it becomes harder, and sometimes there are lower AOV. Like food is a classic case, which is, I'm not talking about fortified food or protein first food.
Yes.
But let's say somebody is building a chips brand, right? That will be very hard, other than online grocery businesses.
Just to add to that, I think
the online. Sorry, I was saying apparel also allows itself very well to the online first model or a D2C model.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, some niche categories like eyewear, for instance, Warby Parker, almost the poster child of D2C, that fits quietly into that area, right? Because someone wearing eyewear would be replacing it in a couple of years at max, and it's also very high gross margin and high AOV item. So some niche areas like that, if brands can find that out, I think it becomes very interesting.
No, absolutely. That has shown us the way in India as well, right? You don't need to look that far. See, the point is, if it's a low frequency category, you gotta make money on the first transaction. There is just no way around it, because whatever you do, if the next buying occasion for that person is more than 6 months or 9 months out, it is going to be a fresh customer acquisition. There's nothing you can do about it. The guy is going to forget the brand. the cookies are going to expire, remarketing can't happen. You really need to go out there and acquire him again. So you got to make money on the first transaction. But if it's high repeat, like Rahul said, if it's food, if it's personal care, then there is an LTV play out there. There's a loyalty play out there that one can, figure out.
Got it.
Great. Let me ask Shashwat if.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey guys, pretty good session as of now. And just to give my background, I am working as a product manager at Freshworks as of now. And what I am building with my brother as of now is a D2C nutraceutical platform.
Excellent.
So just a quick question on that. So we started on Amazon, I think 10 months back, and we have sort of generated $500,000 of revenue. But literally our own website, honestly, 0%, right? And that's where we want to focus now. So any step that, how do we make a shift on that? Or we're pretty sure on the product market fit because we've sold like 100,000 units on Amazon. Confident on the quality of product and customers which we want to target. Challenge which we want to solve now.
And Shashwat, to understand your question, you're looking to replicate this success on your own website.
Exactly. Yes.
And what's the challenge?
So the challenge is, as of now, honestly, from an organic point of view or even from a content point of view, our own website and other assets are not really up to the mark, and our branding has been pretty weak from our own website. It is primarily been on Amazon because we a marketplace approach. So that's how it has come out. But we, because we don't want to literally stop all the campaigning on Amazon because that.
Yeah. Shashwat, my sense is that website game is a goal by 1,000 passes, right? It's not like straightforward like Amazon where you can set up a landing page and then there's anyway inherent demand on the platform. You just do a little bit of AMS and get your flywheel going. On your D2C website, there's a text selection question on whether you go Shopify, Magento, WooCommerce, whatever, BigCommerce, whatever it is. You all your APIs in place so that your delivery, payments, all of that happens smoothly for the customer. You need to get your landing page in order so that the customer it's a new brand. It's not like very well known like Dettol or Lifebuoy or something like that. So you need to educate the customer on the landing page as to why they should buy it. And the standard stuff on any landing page, the product description, the social proof, the differentiation versus other competitors, the key benefits, the FAQs, and so on and so forth, the trust builders, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get all of that, then you're ready to kind of really say, okay, fine, let me put some marketing dollars out there and start running some ad campaigns on Google, on Facebook, and see if I can convert these guys. And then depending on where the customer is dropping off, etc., then kind of reworking that content and then getting your website to a place where you're delivering a 2 to 3% conversion. I think then your economics will start flowing. And again, I'm basing all this on the assumption that you have an AOV of about $10 to $12.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Our retail.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we retail for around $5, INR around 350. But we have usually seen a pack of 2 getting sold. So yes, around $10 is our AOV.
Yeah. So there is enough evidence out there that that's $10 and above. You start making money. So there is a market out there. It's just about the skill sets are content, copy, which is your landing page, the tech that's required, site going, and the analytics and digital marketing to get your ad campaigns running.
One question, Vinay, sometimes people do ask this whole return on sale, right? Or either revenue to marketing cost ratio or gross margin to marketing cost ratio. Do you guys look at like some benchmarks there? Let's assume an AOV of this 600-700 rupees. Uh, what is a good ratio for, let's say, 50 lakh or 1 crore per month kind of a brand?
So revenue to gross margin and revenue to?
Sorry, revenue to CAC or gross margin to CAC? Either of the two.
Gross margin to CAC and revenue to CAC, yeah. So, I mean, the inverse of that is ROAS, which is the industry standard way of looking at it. Yeah, my sense is, see, if you've got your gross margins above 50 odd percent, I mean, essentially, you're looking at being as close to CM2 positivity as possible. In fact, if it's positive, it's great. But if it's negative and you're in a high frequency business, that's still okay. I mean, this is a continuous debate, Rahul. Like, I don't know if I can give you a benchmark here because it's so different. So, for example, in the apparel sector, you'll find very good ROASes. You'll have ROASes at the 3x, 4x sometimes, even going up to 6, 7x. You've seen businesses there. And these are businesses that have gross margins upwards of 65, 70%. So, very profitable, but there the challenges are more inventory led. Right? Whereas categories which are very, very highly competitive, like, for example, the last gentleman who was here who was running the Nutra business, highly competitive category. Very difficult to get ROASes above 2. And there one needs to kind of really think through what's the repeat scaling up acquisition. Personal care maybe lies somewhere in the middle. So, I mean, it's a very category dependent question, Rahul, because it completely depends upon what's the competitiveness of online spends in that category. So, how many other people are bidding for that same audience or keyword?
Interesting. Let me ask Mushtaq. Sorry.
May I ask a question? I have a couple of them.
Sure.
Actually, for Shrey. So,
Okay.
Actually, this is a reverse question, Shrey. So, how do you evaluate investors? And capital.
Got it. Cool.
What's your advice to young startups, okay, or evaluating investors?
So actually, two big learnings for us. One is, I think, just making sure that the fundamental philosophy or fundamental sort of how you're viewing the business scaling is in some way aligned, and what the shape of that business looks like as it scales. So I think there's like even in the venture capital business, we've met folks at various ends of the spectrum, right? In terms of how they think about trade-offs around scale, profitability, what a good business potentially looks like. So I think just having alignment there, or at least a common way of thinking about that, that's pretty helpful in the long run. I think the second piece, to be honest, and it's a little bit soft and fuzzy, but I would say is just kind of good chemistry stroke, just good someone you work with. I think that honestly is probably at lead with that. That's probably 70-80% of what often ends up making the relationship work. So those are two things. I think for us, for example, when we were for Amev and I, right, we were actually very, very keen to work with Fireside at that early stage because they had a third thing which was really expertise, and both Amev and I, Amev from sort of FMCG but product focused, and I had never done anything in FMCG before, so we were also very excited to partner with you guys at that early stage because of the just very, very sectoral expertise that you brought. But I think as over 2-3 years, I think the expertise a lot of folks kind of that you can solve for, but I think there's just having common alignment in terms of how you're thinking about the business in the future, just chemistry, having some alignment there. That stuff to me in hindsight feels probably a little bit more important.
I mean, you had a great journey from private equity and now you're on the other side running a startup, really killing. I mean, what would be your advice in terms of, I mean, especially for early guys who try to raise money, when should they, feel confidence to pull the trigger and raise the money, or when should they say, hey, you know what, now is not the right time?
So really good question. So are you referring to sort of just angel stroke seed money or institutional money?
Any early stage check could be a VC in angel,
Got it.
Not friends and family, because
Got it.
that's just that's faith.
So I would say, I think it's obviously heavily conditioned by the needs of the business, right? Sometimes you needs of the business and your own financial resources. So I think that's one caveat. But I would say once you start raising, say, some sort of, say, anything north of a few $100,000, I would say it would be at the time where you have at least complete conviction in terms of what you want to do, right? So you're clear that, hey, look, I believe that this is a product, this is a category that I'm going to go after. Ideally, by that stage, you've been able to just in a much more frugal way get some proof of concept yourself. Because I think once you raise money, it is a big, I would say, responsibility as well, right? So I think it makes sense to have mental clarity on what you are trying to do. So that, I mean, after that, things may work, things may not work. But just from your own perspective, it makes sense to have that clarity on, okay, I'm being thoughtful with this money, I have a plan for this money, and so on. So and I think the big other factor here is what the business needs and what you have. So I think a little bit complicated.
Thanks. Sorry, Naman, I had to ask a couple of questions. Sorry for interrupting you.
Rahul, you talked about Indian brands going global after a certain scale. Now, going global after a certain scale is one thing, but some brands also, like when you have few brands in your portfolio where brands are going global very early in their journey. Would love to get your thoughts around, creating global brands from India. What categories, any themes, particular trends around that?
I really think, Naman, that the time has come where from India for global stories can get created, right? One is India, a lot of the entrepreneurs are native English speakers, which is a very large population of the world. And that language similarity enables you to speak the same grammar with a lot of audiences out there. And millennials and increasingly Gen Z are culturally converging across a lot of geographies, so that creates an opportunity. The third thing is, if you look at it globally as well, if you look at most retailers' strategy, especially on supply chain, they are looking at a China plus one strategy now, especially post-COVID, and that really gives a really interesting opportunity for Indian brands to go global as well. Again, cross-border e-commerce is becoming easier. In fact, Amazon has just put out a global accelerator program because they're committed to building that bridge from India for global. I think the question one might want to ask themselves is, if I'm building a brand from India for global, what makes it uniquely, defendable as a brand? Why is it a authentic India story, or why do I have a supply chain advantage or a costing or a sourcing advantage that a Chinese, a Taiwanese, or a Korean brand might not have? If you can get comfort around some of those answers, definitely going global is a massive opportunity. Again, I mean, even if it's a brand that only appeals to a certain subsection of the global audiences, let's say the Indian diaspora, that itself might be a large opportunity, especially because as opposed to maybe the pre-commerce era, today you can micro-segment, micro-target these audiences, really talk to them one-on-one, and create equity and therefore, as a result, revenue. I truly believe that over the next 5 years, we will see a lot of from India for global large brands.
I'll just add, Mushtaq.
Yeah. Hi, guys. A quick intro about me. My name's Mustaqim. I right now work in a early stage startup, but previously I'd worked in Bain, and the primary focus area was on consumer brands. So what I've learned there is in large scale companies, we've seen and observed that if we need to scale, you have to have a portfolio of brands. And what we touched, what probably Rahul and Vinay touched during the discussion with Akash. But my question is more on early stage startups. How would you take the trade-off decision between, say, you're starting off in a category which is probably a niche, which has growth potential later on, but how do you decide in terms of how large do you want to keep your portfolio? Because if I have to think from a consumer point of view, if I have to buy, say, a washing powder, I might not be too brand loyal, but I'm more concerned about the flavor or the pack size, which I'm usually used to buy. Say if I usually buy a 2 kilo Ariel pack, but if in case that's not available, I'll go probably for a 2 kilo Surf Excel. Similarly, since I'm in a category which is probably pretty early, how do I take the trade-off between having a under a single brand a large portfolio with different pack sizes, different flavors, different varieties, vers- versus probably go with a more focused approach and scale fewer SKUs because probably fewer SKUs are easier to manage, or do I go with an approach of having multiple SKUs, a larger portfolio, because that will help me not lose out on customers because of SKU unavailability, but comes along with its own challenges of inventory management. So how does one take the trade-off in early stage?
Yeah, at least in my mind, this response is dependent on the category that you're operating in. And, depending on the category, you will find consumer expect certain range available with the brand. So let's say you start let's say you start a luggage brand. Maybe you don't need a lot of SKUs. You can start with few high versus, and again, speaking for Shrey, like let's say Kapiva, where my assumption is that you will need a broader range of SKUs compared to 5 or 10, for example. And obviously, inventory complexity matters, but good part is in a lot of these cases, unless you're in fashion, these are not stuff that goes out of season so soon also. So as long as you're not hitting the expiry mark and all, or not close to that, you at least don't have an issue if, other than the working capital that is stuck. It is not that the inventory is going to go waste. So I think certain width is needed to make consumer feel that you're providing everything that brand stands for within that category. I think size pieces, at least I've seen in initial days, need not be as big a concern, that you don't have to have a 1 kg and a 2 kg and a 3 kg pack range. I've generally seen brands going with the packs that sells the most, and later on figure out different size categories or size variations.
Understood. But size was just an example. But in case we are looking in terms of flavors or pack sizes or varieties, in areas where probably you are creating that category where you do not have base examples to refer to. So would experimentation with multiple SKUs portfolio help, or probably going with an hypothesis and testing it out and then seeing whether it's a success or a failure? Would that be the right approach?
So we just recently invested in a company which is in the similar kind of space that you're talking about, where they have started with 4 or 5 SKUs, and then they're listening to the customer. And maybe in some case they might change the taste, in some case they might change the positioning. But they're on day one, they're not starting with a very large range. But then it's a niche category. So you can at least do that, the example you gave, where you are creating the category itself. There it is possible to start with fewer SKUs and experiment and then expand.
Understood. Thanks, Rahul.
Maybe Sanket, if Sanket, are you there? I don't know if he's still there.
Yeah,
okay,
am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Hey guys, I'll just give a quick intro of myself. I also work with Cadatan. And I had actually an observation. We get to see a lot of these D2C brands which have now scaled up quite a bit. One thing I commonly observe with them is that unlike our global colleagues who often present deals which have D2C brands which have a substantial portion of their business coming from their own websites. They're running either their own apps or their own websites. And these websites are like proper single brand apps and single brand websites where they have brought the customers. But in Indian case specifically, we see a lot of these D2C companies having their own websites, but at the same time having a substantial share of their revenues coming from marketplaces. The techniques that they use for brand communication and especially using social media and search engine optimization, etc., look very similar. But for some reason, and I would like to understand your thoughts on it. It appears that in India, it's been a difficult, it's been a challenge for these guys to, make your own, make your own website the core engine.
Yeah, and I can give few guesses. Sanket and maybe Vinay and Shrey, you guys can also add to that. I think we are still early in that curve where first consumers are going to trust an Amazon or a Flipkart that when they order the item will actually arrive. I think we have not yet reached a stage where the trust is fully there at a broad level. Second, we are still a low AOV country.
Yeah.
If you look at the online space, and hence sometimes the CAC to AOV math on your own brand is harder to justify. And there are a few companies I've seen where on Amazon they can sell and still make 20% CM2, but on their own website they might lose money on the first order, and the second order is when they make money. So obviously, when you have limited capital as a founder, you would say that why not scale more on the website that is, or on the channel that is making more money from me on that first transaction. So at least those are my two guesses on why it is different. I think it will change over next 3 to 5 years. Vinay, if you have a different view, Shrey, please do speak up on this one.
Yeah, Rahul kind of echoes the same, right? I mean, if you look at global comparables, in the US, out of 330 million people, I think about 270 or 265 million people shop online, and about 300 million people are actually browsing for information and entertainment online. And compare that to India, out of 1.2 billion, there are only about 500 million who are browsing for content online, and only about 150 to 200 million who are shopping online. And if you further peel that onion layer, a lot of them are, people who come in once a year and maybe make one transaction on a Flipkart or an Amazon during Diwali. The real regular shoppers are only about 50 to 60 million. And that number is growing though. Therefore, in that next 5 years, as that 50, 60 million gets to about 2 million, that critical mass of users who are used to transacting online will then say, hey, I'm comfortable transacting online, maybe with a Make My Trip, with an Amazon, with a Flipkart. Let me try and shop either also on a website that I have not before. And that's when we'll see a lot more sales coming from standalone websites rather than marketplaces. But I think it's just a stage of evolution as of today. And as Rahul, you rightly pointed out, if you happen to play in a category or a brand position where your AOVs are not high, then it just makes more sense to be a part of a larger basket than individually shipping out items, because then you lose money on the logistics. So I think those are twin reasons why we see that mix kind of a little different in India versus global. But you know what? We've got Shrey. He must have tried everything, so he can share his.
Yeah.
I have a slightly different point of view actually. I would say, I mean, D2C is fantastic, and it's absolutely, it must be absolutely strategic to how you think about company building today, right? But it's also, end of the day, it's one of many distribution channels. So I would in fact flip it around and say, look, in India, if you're seeing absolutely tremendous product market fit on D2C, or let's say if you're running a business in the US, if you're seeing tremendous product market fit through your own channel, unless there's something unique to your category or what you're offering to the consumer, where fundamentally, let's say a marketplace, vertical stroke horizontal doesn't allow it, I would ask the question of you're almost leaving food on the entering those, say, other channels, right? Number one. And I think even if you go to the US, I think there have been sort of trade-offs, right? These capital efficiency trade-offs. When you look at brands like, say, a Halo Top, RX Bar, they've just been phenomenally capital efficient because they did use D2C as a channel from very early on. They were super sort of savvy online on the marketing stroke distribution side, but they also went broad. And I would argue that D2C can be a very, very important pillar for how you build the business, but just restricting yourself to DTC, unless there's some category constraints or there's some sort of reasons why you can't effectively sort of sell in other channels, I would also ask the question why. Why would you just limit yourself to one channel if you can sell in multiple channels? Obviously, bandwidth can be a constraint, but as companies scale, as you raise more capital, you can solve some of those constraints.
Sorry, I think I might have moved him out. Let me move to Vaishnavi.
Spoken like a true hustler, Shrey.
No, but if you don't sell to them, someone else will. I think I mean I think bandwidth constraints, organizational constraints are really the ones that would hold me back. But if you can solve for some of those and you're seeing strong product market fit in one channel, why not try others as well?
Okay, so I have a small business called Earthen Puppy, and right now what I do, so we make sustainable home decor, candles, planters, and stuff like that. So right now the only channel that I'm selling is on Instagram, but I think Shrey actually addressed what I was about to ask. As of now it's really small and bootstrapped, and so but then he answered saying that if you have the opportunity to moving and diversifying, if you have the bandwidth, why not do it? So I don't know. I think I wanted to ask about that, but he answered it. Now I really don't have any points.
No problems. No problem. Let me then bring up somebody. Two more people left. So Avisha, sorry, what time? Avisha, do you want to ask the question?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi guys. I just wanted to ask. I'm the owner of a small business myself, e-commerce D2C. I know you guys were talking about the future and you mentioned COD, and that's something I've been really struggling with. Do you see a future in India where there's not that much reliance on COD for e-commerce?
I think so. As in, I think obviously the government is also wanting more and more digital payments. So I do feel that in next, again, hard to put a timeline to this, but I have a feeling that in next 2 to 3 years, we will see a significant decline in COD. I think even if you look at audiences around you, younger population don't like carrying cash. So hopefully that will also translate as they become mainstream buyers over a period of time. So I at least feel that will happen. Hard to put a timeline though.
Wish thinking in 10 years, we'll all move to crypto.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just asking as a follow-up, what would you think for us business owners, what we should do to encourage the use of digital payments? Do you think we should just stop allowing COD as an option?
That's almost like calling a customer to your shop and telling them, I will not sell your product.
Exactly.
So you give them the option, but slowly nudge them towards digital payments, maybe give them an incentive to do it. Make it easy for them to pay through UPI and not having to, because most of the transactions are on a mobile phone. The big pain point is you click UPI and then you get a message saying, okay, we sent your request, now open your app and pay there, and that's like a big friction point anyway. So if you make it easy and nudge the customer with incentives, I think we've seen some examples where some of the brands have been successful in shifting a lot of their COD towards prepaid options.
Great, guys. I think we are seriously over time. We had originally thought of doing this for an hour. We are at hour and 20. But this was great, and hopefully we'll continue this more regularly. Thanks, Vinay, Shrey, Naman, Anak. and everybody in the audience to be part of this room.
Thanks, Anand. Thanks, Rahul, for
Thank
Shrey.
you.
Thanks
Thank you
so
so
much.
much.
For your
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
guys. Yeah.
Bye.
thanks for the time out.